Hello and welcome to a behind the scenes episode, which, remember, are the ones that aren't scripted. Not all of them are, as you may be able to tell. What I wanted to look at and try and explain to people was why, when you go to, say, Kontakt, everyone uses the stereo instance. Have you ever wondered what these are for? These multi-outputs. No, I hear you say, because what you do, what most people do, is open up Kontakt, get an instrument they want and load it in. Great. Now we can play. Some people might have played around with doing this, dragging a second instrument in, and they both play at the same time. So that way you can sort of blend instruments together. And build up a sort of multi-patch. But did you know what the multi-output was for? So if we load a software instrument, but this time we go to multi-output, it looks very similar, but what you can do, actually, probably the first thing to say is, how can you tell the difference? And it is down here in the mixer. If it's a multi-output instrument, you get these plus and minus buttons to add and remove auxiliary tracks, which will become apparent shortly. What you need to be able to see is the outputs, like so. But what you probably want to do is go to the factory setting for whichever one you set. So if I selected 16 lots of stereo, let's do that. So we now have outputs labeled, and because they are stereo, this is 1 and 2, that's 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7 and 8, for example. So if I load in strings, this is going to work just as the other one did. But what you can do is now see on this output section that you can choose where things are routed to, but you have to make sure they exist. If I output that to channel 2 and 3, it's fine. Okay, so I can output to all these, so they're all going somewhere and coming out of the stereo out. But the question is, what happens if let's grab the brass again. What if I want these to come out of a different channel? So output 2, which is stereos, tracks 3 and 4. Okay, so yes, they are coming out of different outputs. What you can do though is change the MIDI channel that things come in on. So if we set strings to 1 and brass to 2, now we're only getting strings. There is no brass because that's out that's waiting for MIDI channel 2. There's no information coming in there. So how on earth do you change that? Well, you have the option in the track inspector to choose the MIDI in port. Not the MIDI in port, the MIDI in channel. So that would set it to 1. If I set it to 2, well, nothing's happening now. So why isn't this making a sound? Well, the problem is we don't have a track for it. So what we're going to do is create this auxiliary track, which is, so the input is Kontakt 3 and 4. Right click and create a track for it. Aha! As if by magic, what I can probably do is turn off that link, because if you've got link on, it's going to just go to the instrument on that channel, and if we look, there isn't actually an instrument on the channel, it's just the input from Kontakt. But we now have control over it on 2 different tracks. So probably a good way to demonstrate is just record something in. I don't know what that was. And then I'm going to get picky because I didn't have the metronome on. So what we are now doing, from one instance of Kontakt where you can see everything, and I suppose what you would probably do is have them minimized. So you've got control here, but also you have tracks where you can add audio effects after Kontakt. What else would that be useful for? Well, it would help you keep everything organized. So if you had multiple instruments in the same place, you could then, when it's set up, you could see all your instruments here in one block. You would want to label them properly. So that was Albion 1. I suppose what you might do so now that you've got the idea of how to set it up, this is where your template becomes your world and you work out how you want to organize it. So I might think, actually, I want the highs and the lows as well available. So as you put each one in, you would remember this is going to go to output 3, go to output 4. keep things simple, make that output 3. Sorry, MIDI 3. Make that MIDI 4. Are you still following along? Because then you need to remember the mixer. Get your extra ports. 3, 4, so we've got 5, 6, 7 and 8. It's going to be MIDI 3, be MIDI 4. You can shift click another one when you create tracks, so you create them both at the same time. And did I do 7 and 8? Oh yes, but I was playing in the wrong part of the keyboard, so you won't get a sound. And then you realise you've got that on the wrong channel. We should have channel 1, strings. So depending on which one you select, it plays a different instrument ready loaded in one instance of Kontakt. Now, some people say it makes very little difference to CPU performance whether you have one instance of Kontakt or many. Personally, I think this is a useful way to organise things if you are creating big templates, because you can then, instead of seeing everything spread out everywhere, you can just open, say, I would probably not have strings in here, and I would make this all brass that I might ever want to use, and create those tracks ready to go. Now this is specifically for Kontakt. Now other instruments you have, let's do an empty one, may well have multi-output options. So for example, I know that BBC SO can have multi-outputs. Colossus can't. Abbey Road 1 can. And depending on if this is a different plugin, because this isn't Kontakt now, it depends how the developer has created their plugin as to what you can do with it. So for example, now I was just thinking, did I create that as a multi-output? And looking down here, I think the answer was no. Let's try that again. Aha, now we've got a little plus and minus, so we know that's working. What I know you can do with BBC SO Pro, this doesn't work with Core or Discover. This is microphone positions. Well, I've forgotten the names of. What's it? Close. Oh no, ambient is the third one, isn't it? What's the first one? So mic positions, close tree, out ambient. I could have swapped these. I could have just routed these differently, but let's do it in the same order so it's obvious what's happening. When I show this, I'm probably better off getting rid of those tracks. Okay, so we added the extra lanes. We need to make sure there's a track for them. So we've got control over their faders and stuff like that. Because this is a multi-output now, you can see down here under each microphone, you can choose which stereo out they go to, because we said it was going to be a multi-output instrument. So what you can do is turn on all these. I can put them at 100% because I'm going to have control over them in the mixer. So we've got sound. Now, everything is coming out of, in fact, we've only got one signal where everything is coming out. So what we can do now is change the output of the different mic positions. Now you see we've got 4 signals. So I could just now, instead of having this great thing open, or I could choose the close. Or mix my own. The good thing about this is now you can technically EQ each. So if you want to take the top off the close, but maybe boost it, in the outriggers, so potentially it gives you more options for really crafting your sound. So that's probably a bit too in depth to bother mentioning on the Logic Pro tips. What I will probably stick to doing is explaining Kontakt. That makes sense, because let's just run through that one more time. So what I would want to do is show having a track, going to Kontakt, creating a 16 stereo multi-out. What would you do next? You would view the outputs, make sure you set it on the factory setting to 16 stereo, because that's what we chose. I would then load in 2 instruments, and as we've just seen, probably doing high, low and mid brass isn't a good idea because the keys that play the notes are going to vary. There you can see everything's coming out. You're playing both instruments at the same time. So what you need to do is make sure they are routed to different outputs to start with. So that's going to output 1. It's going to output 2. And then you change the MIDI port. So that is 1. And that is 2. But how do you make sure, because now I'm only going to get brass, not strings, how do I get another track to play the strings? And that is where you use the mixer. Remembering the plus and the minus shows you that it's a multi-output track. So we can add another one, create a track for it, and change its settings. Now, interestingly, it did that automatically, or remembered. Yeah, nice. Don't label it strings if it's brass. And what I might do, I showed summing stacks, but it might be useful in that case to do by library that you have created. That would make sense, wouldn't it? Got one instance of Kontakt, one instance, 2 instruments, both with different tracks. What you do with that, please leave in the comments. How would you use it in your setup? I think that's really handy. But the entire point being, nobody ever really stops to ask, what are all these options? What do I do with them? Are they any good? There you go. That will be considerably shortened for next week's Logic Pro tip. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, always appreciated. We'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.